This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
You're listening to the longest running weekly episodic comic book podcast in all Place to Be Nation.
Broadcasting from the state-of-the-art L-shaped studios at beautiful and serene Ho-Ho-Loon Plaza in Vancouver, British Columbia. Greg Phillips and Nick Duke are the Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
Coming to you live. Well, you've already listened to all that stuff, folks. I'm Greg Phillips. With me, as always, at my side is the illustrious Nicholas Duke, and we are the Hard-Traveling Fanboys. And we are indeed enjoying a lovely summer day here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, in Ho-Ho-Loon Plaza, inside the comfortable 65-degree L-shaped studios. And we are here to bring you another edition in our ongoing series, Hard Travelers for Hire. And Nick, I've always said that if there's two words to describe you, it would be a hard traveler.
Yes, and if there is two words to describe you, especially given your most of your social media postings, it would be for hire.
Indeed. And with that being said, Nick, I can't help but notice that you've had some bags under your eyes lately.
Some bags under my eyes? I wouldn't know anything about what you're talking about.
I've noticed you haven't been getting a lot of sleep, and I want to let you know about something that I think could help.
Oh boy, here we go. Is it a Casper mattress?
How'd you guess?
Well, I've heard you talk about the Casper mattress before, and I gotta say, it sounds like a pretty good deal.
Yes, the Casper mattress, Nick, I'm glad you've heard about, because you can actually get one of these Casper mattresses at a low, low price right now. And if you do, I'm going to tell you it's the best night of sleep you'll ever have. Casper mattresses are firm, yet soft. Casper mattresses will flex themselves to your body. That's right, flex themselves to your body, a la Lex Luger in the mid-90s. You can get the Casper mattress to contour to each crevice of your body, and it will help you get a better night's sleep. Those bags will disappear overnight. Your life will be transformed thanks to Casper mattress. Casper mattress.
Yeah. You're the shill, not me. I don't know anything else. What else do you want me to say about the damn mattress? Casper mattress. Buy one.
Absolutely. So in this week's edition of the Hard Travelers for Hire series, easy for me to say, which of course is brought to you by 1-800-Flowers, the best way to deliver flowers to your spouse, loved one, or family member. Brings us to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, Guardians of the Galaxy even, Volume 2, is, as its title would imply, Nick, the sequel to Ant-Man.
Indeed.
And brings us the ongoing stories of Peter Star-Lord Quill and his merry band of friends. And as many of you know, if you've listened to our series, and if you haven't, please go back in the archives and listen to our previous episodes of this. We both loved Guardians of the Galaxy and thought it was a real breath of fresh air into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which, granted, had not gotten stale per se, but did tend to get a little formulaic at times, and Guardians of the Galaxy represented a vast departure from that. So here we have the second installment in what both of us said was the riskiest MCU movie to that point. And how were they going to follow this up? How was writer-director James Gunn going to match the intrigue of the first movie and push it in different directions? Or would he himself be satisfied with what they had accomplished in the first one and give us more of the same? Well, as I think you'll find out over the course of this episode, the answer is kind of somewhere in the middle, where it does give you more of what you loved in the first movie, but also pushes us forward a little bit into some areas that the MCU had rarely traversed in terms of powerful emotional moments. So we will get into all of that here, Nick. But just as a refresher, what were your thoughts on the first movie in this franchise, Guardians of the Galaxy?
Guardians of the Galaxy was one of the only movies thus far in the Marvel Pantheon, possibly other than Ant-Man, that you and I both just really knew nothing about going into. And thus, I think that lack of knowledge really helped to keep expectations low. And so Guardians of the Galaxy was one of those movies where you walk in not really expecting much of anything, and you're blown away by what's put on screen. Like, it was just one of the most positive experiences I've had in a movie theater ever, really, just because of my expectations versus the final product. So, big fan of the first one, and I was obviously pumped for the second one by the time it came along, and thus, higher expectations for this one, of course.
Yes, and this one added a couple of cast members that we will get into over the course of this film, but before we delve right into it, ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder of how Hard Travelers for Hire works, it's just like off the page when we look at a movie or TV show. What we do is we pull it up on our DVD, Blu-ray, VHS, or streaming device, and we sync it up and watch it at the same time on mute with the subtitles on. And we want to invite you to do the same. If you're listening along in the car, if you're at work or something, that's cool too. I don't think it'll affect the flow of the podcast. We're not going to do a running commentary per se. But what we do is we run the movie just to kind of remind us of things or guide our conversation just a little bit along the way. We're not going to watch the entire movie over the course of this session. But if you'd like to watch along with us and follow what we're talking about here a little bit, you can throw on the movie. We'll give you a second here. You can pause us, skip ahead a little bit, whatever. And we are both paused at the beginning of the film. And what we're going to do is count you in here, and then we're going to get right into our conversation about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So, with all that said, we're going to hit play in 3, 2, 1, play. Now, I can't remember, Nick, was Guardians 2 the first movie to introduce this brand new opening sequence with the movies in the place of the comics?
No, I believe it was Civil War, actually, that did it. Either Civil War or Doctor Strange.
Very cool.
But it was an invention for Phase 3 that followed after Ant-Man, I think.
And it helps differentiate the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies from other movies that might have the Marvel logo at the beginning.
Exactly.
So that's pretty cool. I noticed that during Deadpool 2 recently. So, yeah, and we get right off starting with a really cool kind of retro title sequence here. One of the things that I loved about Guardians of the Galaxy and James Gunn's vision for this franchise is it's futuristic, and yet it's steeped in 80s nostalgia, right? 80s and 70s nostalgia. And apparently the aesthetic.
Greg, apparently the new intro was debuted in July of 2016, which would have meant that Doctor Strange was the first film to have it attached to.
Very good. And here you see Star-Lord, Peter Quill's mother, singing badly along to the song Brandy by Looking Glass. Now, again, I love the 80s and 70s aesthetic of these movies. Just visually, it looks like something that would have been shot by a Steven Spielberg or someone like that. And yet it's got this futuristic and, of course, incredible CGI element to it the whole time. But a part of this aesthetic fits perfectly with this guy who is brand new to the cast in this movie, and that is Kurt Russell with that, what we've come to know as that patented Marvel de-aging CGI effect that makes him look like a freaking 25-year-old Kurt Russell. And here he is playing a character we will come to know as Ego, the Living Planet. And Nick, what are your thoughts on the de-aging effect here?
Oh.
And indeed, this opening with Kurt Russell and Star-Lord's mom.
The de-aging effect has just gotten better and better each time they've used it. This might be the most impressive usage of it to this point. Capturing, with the Robert Downey Jr. effect from Civil War, it was great. but this one actually captures some of those wrinkles and age lines that Kurt Russell always had, even in his younger days. And so it's almost like this perfect photorealistic representation. It's really uncanny what they were able to do. But yeah, this opening sequence is a nice, it provides a nice bit of visual and storytelling continuity with
love with Peter's mom here. It seems like they care for one another. He's planted this object that we don't know what it is or what it's going to do. So it's kind of setting up a little bit of ambiguity as to his role in the film, which I appreciate as well. It also renders his chin perfectly.
And we are introduced to Drax's sensitive nipples.
Yes, I have very sensitive nipples. This is, by the way, the first of, countless times in this movie that Nick and I are probably going to chuckle and reference a line delivered by Dave Batista as Drax. He was great in the first movie, but I think you and I agree he was even better here.
Yeah, he gets more to do here. They kind of move him. I mean, the first movie, it's all so dry, and here he gets a little bit more. I mean, while they're still not having him go out and be slapstick or anything, he gets a few more punchlines than just dry comments played at face value. So a little bit more to do for Dave here. I think they realized they had kind of a comedic tour de force in Dave Bautista, and they definitely lean into it. And here we're also seeing Baby Groot, who was the big breakout star of like the credits of Guardians of the Galaxy 1. So he gets a pretty big, majorly expanded role here.
Yes, and he actually gets the foreground here as all of our heroes are battling a giant squid creature in the background, which maybe I'm overthinking it, but I feel like that's a little bit of a visual homage to Watchmen with the giant space squid in the background.
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily would make that connection, but I think, probably overthinking that one a bit.
Oh, that's rich coming from you, Mr. Overthinking It. Nick, they call you that.
You yourself just said you were overthinking it, and so when I agree with you, then you take issue? Come on.
Absolutely. You never agree with me on anything.
That's not true.
That's actually not true. We agree on almost everything, which is the problem.
Most things.
We need to have false disagreements.
Hot takes. Nothing but hot takes.
Hot takes, that's right.
I think this movie sucks.
I think it is the greatest movie of all time.
Oh, there you go. Now we have a podcast.
Yeah. Anyway, so giant squid fighting the Guardians in the background. A nice callback here to the first movie in the credit sequence as Groot stops dancing every time Drax looks at him.
Yes.
And Drax is tremendous in this movie. Like you said, he gets a little bit more to do, but also I think you get a little unspoken character development from Drax because it's a character that has learned to have fun around these people that, whether he'll admit it or not, and he does later in the movie, this has become his new family, and he's somebody that takes great joy in the oddest of things. Other characters suffering, other practical jokes he thinks are great now, and just that unspoken push forward in his character from one movie to the next. A sign of mature writing and a sign of mature performance from Dave here. And he's just damn funny every time he appears. For me, he is in a movie filled with great performances, I'll go ahead and say he is my MVP of this movie.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so tough because, like you said, the movie is filled with so many great performances. I don't know that he's necessarily my MVP. That might go to another character I'm sure we'll discuss, but he's right up there, man. But everybody in this movie is really bringing their A game, so it's hard to really draw distinctions between a lot of these guys.
Yes, and now poor Groot is upset that his radio has been destroyed. So this movie picks up some. I don't know if it really. They don't really establish how long it's been since the first movie, right? It's just some.
Yeah, it clearly it couldn't have been very long because they still have Baby Groot. I think the implication I've heard before is that this only takes place a few months after the first film. Right.
So we've advanced forward a little bit in time, but it's not really that important, honestly. And the team is somewhat cohesive here, but they still have their little spats, as you're seeing here on screen, between Star-Lord and Gamora. Drax's plan doesn't work out so well. But yeah, you've gotten the team on the same page here for the most part. There are still issues between them, as anyone that's seen the first movie knows that Rocket is a little rough around the edges, and he and Star-Lord don't get along all the time. That's going to play a role in this movie and be a subplot. Gamora is even though Star-Lord is the de facto team leader, Gamora really is the one that seizes control in the heat of battle. And of course, Drax is a wild man. So everybody's serving their roles here in the group. And the other thing about this visual battle here is this creature is spewing rainbow beams out of himself, and to see this in the theater was really cool. It almost seems like a movie that would actually be served by 3D.
Yeah, I believe we did not see it in 3D, but it certainly seems like one that would do well in 3D. I remember seeing the first Guardians in 3D for my initial theatrical experience, and it was that rare movie that was actually enhanced, I felt like. So
yeah, I believe that James Gunn said on Twitter that his preferred way for people to see this was in the 3D IMAX version. If possible, and of course that wasn't what we did, but this is one that, to your point, yeah, it does look like it would be served by that. And again, the visual dynamic is great throughout. I think that James Gunn is one of the most creative visual directors in terms of effects and just how his world looks. He did like gold, though. You have to admit that.
Hey, after looking at this chick, who can blame you if he likes gold?
Yeah. Hey, Star-Lord was going to find out personally.
Well, no, that was strictly for academic purposes.
Oh, academic purposes, King. Oh, that's real cute. Kind of logic went out and ate it too. And here we see the introduction of Nebula, who, of course, was one of the villains of the first movie, the other daughter of Thanos, who hates Gamora with a passion, hates Thanos with even more of a passion, and has made it her mission to try to take the life of her estranged sister, Gamora. Here, she is taken into custody by the Guardians and becomes a much more active part of the movie in this one than she did in the first one.
That's kind of a cool thing where like the crown is built into the throne, so when she stands up, it just kind of leaves itself behind. That's a little,
I didn't notice that actually.
It's a little cool costume design. See here, this is one of those movies that we're both just sitting here watching the movie because it's so good. That's the problem. That's the problem with doing this as a podcast.
Exactly. So, so would you agree that Nebula has a much more active role in this movie?
Oh, absolutely.
By Karen Gillan?
I mean, they're kind of trying to make her a member of the Guardians. I know, like, and again, we hate to apply future knowledge to these films as we're reviewing them, but we know that doesn't wind up happening because she's no longer with the Guardians when Infinity War picks up, but she's essentially a member of the team here by the end of the film anyway. So that's
right.
Obviously a bigger role than she had in the first one. Yeah.
Yeah, and having recently read Infinity Gauntlet here on the show in the Longbook Hunters, it is certainly a much different version of Nebula that we get here than what we got in the comic.
Oh, for sure. This version, I mean, even down to her appearance, like the cybernetic aspect isn't really even part of her character in the comic. So this is very interesting indeed.
Yes. So we get Karen Gillan's Nebula, we get Chris Pratt's Star-Lord, Zoe Saldana's Gamora, Bradley Cooper as the voice of Rocket Raccoon, and of course, the most important performer on the roster, Vin Diesel as the voice of Baby Groot.
Mm-hmm. He's definitely gets to show some of that trademark Vin Diesel range in this role.
That's right. And, I really feel like Vin Diesel's ability to tap into emotions has never been more on display than when Baby Groot cries later on in the film after he's being tortured by the Ravagers.
Mm-hmm. And here we get to see a little, Chris Pratt getting to show off those abs. He's like, I'm not going to get in shape for nothing without at least one shirtless scene, even though it plays no role in the movie.
And speaking of ravaging, he wants to ravage Gamora, but she ain't having none of it.
No, she is not. She is not having any of it as of yet.
That's right.
They are still playing up that will they or won't they tension, because apparently, like we said, this takes place fairly shortly after the events of the first one.
You might even say that it's a Sam and Diane.
Oh, I see what you did there. I see what you did there. He says that in the movie, so you said it on the podcast. I get it.
Indeed, that's the rub, old friend. Oh, here's one of my favorite parts of the movie right here. Drax explaining the history of his relationship with his wife, Star-Lord.
Yes, Ovette, talking about how she was basically motionless whenever music was played.
It would engorge his nether regions when he would look at her face, and you might think, dead. Oh, well, you know.
Oh, God.
And my television just cut off for some reason. There we go. So, yeah, the basic premise here, the Guardians are doing their thing around. They're collecting bounties, money. But, as it turns out, they run afoul of the Sovereign because Rocket cannot keep himself from thieving. Mm-hmm. And it sets off a chain of events that will lead to a ongoing war with the Sovereign, and it will lead to them encountering Ego and being taken to Ego's planet. So pretty much everything in the movie that happened originates from this decision by Rocket to take this material from the hands of the Sovereign and offend them in the process. So quite a mistake here from old Rocket.
Yeah, I mean, just showing off, that this character hasn't really evolved much between the two movies because he's still very selfish, not really attempting to put himself out there with these other characters, even though he took some small steps towards that in the first movie. He still has a lot of growth and a lot of room to go as a character, which we kind of see him take that journey over the course of this movie, which is appreciated. Because I'm one of those people who, while I enjoyed Rocket in the first one, he was not, he was clearly behind Star-Lord, Drax, and Groot, at least in terms of the 5 co-leads.
Sure, me. I agree completely. And if you remember, one of my minor complaints in the first one is his dialogue, in that they overused idiot as an insult, or he said it like, I don't know, I feel like he said it 8 or 9 times in the movie, and it just got to be overkill. It's like, come on with something different than that. And in this one, he says it, I think, once.
Now, if he had been voiced by Chris Jericho, you would have thought it was brilliant.
Absolutely, and it would have been, because it would have been ironic. Now, can you argue that? Can you disagree with that? Hell no. Now, if Ant-Man had been Hulk Hogan in Japan, you would have loved it.
That's true. I would have. It would have been much more interesting than Ant-Man himself.
Oh.
Because there wouldn't have been...
He did a clothesline.
There wouldn't have been any Luis in the movie, and that would have greatly enhanced it.
No, just an Inoki.
Yes, that would have been much better.
Speaking of Inoki, there's really no way to transfer from Inoki back to Guardian. So let's just not even use a transition. Let's just say that the space travel effects in this movie were really cool. I thought, anyway. Very, you're getting shots of the cockpit and everything of these ships. Very Star Wars inspired. I don't think there's any question about that, right?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, this is very, Millennium Falcon. It has that kind of feel to it. Now, that being said, they have the benefit of modern day technology, and they're able to pull this kind of, main cast in the cockpit scene off better than Star Wars was back then, just because of, these special effects are outstanding. You're able to do more. These are some really thrilling dogfights they have here in space.
Yes, and also I wanted to throw attention to, in addition to being the cockpit scenes being clearly influenced by Star Wars, we talked earlier, I did, about that 70s and 80s dynamic. I love what they do here with the Sovereign, because they essentially turn this galactic dogfight into a 1980s game of Galaga.
Yes. Perhaps a little bit of that Last Starfighter type callback to it. Just a really outstanding concept here, and something that we would see later on in this year, actually, in the film Ready Player One, a similar type of concept used for the villains in that film. So,
yeah, where the Sovereign are actually playing video games, basically, that turn into real life spaceships that can destroy the Guardians. Even to the sound effects, when the ships blow up, it makes that classic 80s pew 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 sound effect. You know?
Yes.
And it's tremendous, really, the whole time through.
Yes, it is. And so,
visually, it's an incredible movie, really, the whole way through. But these scenes in particular stand out to me.
And this is a cool moment. Drax is going to do a space jump, essentially, and take out that last ship with a machine gun, which is nonsensical but awesome.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it also leads to another great Drax moment, as subtle as it is. They crash on this planet, and he's being dragged behind them, beaten into trees, rolling across the ground, and he's laughing the entire time. And at the end of it says, "That was awesome!" So he's almost got a childlike mentality at times.
Man, and here comes the rest of the Sovereign fleet. This is a cool dynamic that we're seeing here. And now we get the first appearance of Ego in the film, as we have just seen him essentially save the Guardians from certain destruction.
Yep, and there he is waving to them. So, yeah, at this point, you really don't know what Ego's motivations are. You don't know if he's a good guy, if he's a bad guy. You don't really know what his deal is. Of course, in the comics, Ego is a literal living planet with a Fu Manchu mustache, right?
Yeah, for the most part, yes. It's kind of like Mogo over on the DC side, except Mogo doesn't have a face. Ego literally has a face taking up one entire side of his planet's surface. So we actually see a couple of callbacks to that later in the film. But for this movie, they kind of go with an approach where Ego is able to build things using the power within him, and so he builds a human construct and imbues it with his very essence.
Has there ever been a fight between Ego and Mogo in the comics?
I wouldn't imagine so. It would have had to happen in one of the DC Marvel crossovers, and I don't think Ego and Mogo was high on the list of clamored for clashes.
I want to see it. Who do you think would win?
Who do I think would win? Yeah. As of this very moment, I'm going to go with, I think Ego would win.
You think Ego beats Mogo?
I do.
Why is that?
Well, there are certain story elements that have played out in Thor, God of Thunder that you haven't seen that would lead me to believe that Ego might have the upper hand in this one.
Now let me ask you this. Who do the gory bomb?
That would, of course, would be Chavo Guerrero.
Very good. Now, Nick, that might have set the record for the most inside reference we've ever done.
Yeah, literally no one else is going to find, no one else.
Yep. And I ask you, Nick, do you have a problem with that?
No, absolutely not.
Very good. What shirt is Star-Lord wearing here?
I don't know. Just some weird alien shirt.
I love weird alien shirts. I want one. Oh, son of a man. I accidentally turned my movie off, Nick.
Harbulary batteries. Yep. Drax continuing to call them something completely different.
You gotta love Drax. I mean, if you don't love Drax, I'm going to physically force you to love Drax. Now, I'm going to need from you, Nick, a timestamp on your film.
A timestamp on my film. Here we go. I don't have one.
Okay, fair enough.
We are 1 hour,
but fair.
1 hour and 52 minutes and 30 seconds away from the end of the film.
You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Duke, but I respect it.
Yep.
You're 1 hour and 52 minutes and how many seconds?
30 away from the end of the film.
Okay, I'm a little bit ahead of you then. No.
Mm-hmm. You were a little ahead of me before, so.
Very good.
So we have just seen Ego's ship land upon the surface of this planet, and we're about to get the first meeting of Ego and the Guardians.
Yes. And I'm assuming that the fact that his name's Ego should give away that he is a somewhat arrogant individual.
Well, he's an alien. How do we know that Ego really means anything in his language, like what it means in ours?
Well, good point. Good point. You got to give this to Kurt Russell. That man can grow a beard, can't he?
That's a good beard. Good beard.
Good beard, good head of hair.
Good hair, yep.
And he comes to him. What the hell is that? He comes to them with his assistant, Mantis. Played by, Nick, I'm going to let you tell the people who plays Mantis.
I'm going to go with Klementieff.
There you have it. And Howard the Duck cameo.
Yes.
Once you conduct, you're out of luck. Voiced by?
Seth Green.
Yep. And, gosh, they're just introducing them hot and heavy here now. Now we get a shirtless Blue Merle for you, Nick.
Yeah, Blue Merle, who, when you were talking about Drax being the MVP, I could not quite go that far just because I felt like it was shortchanging Blue Merle a bit, because I think he's the real MVP of this film.
And, of course, when we say Blue Merle, we're referring to Michael Rooker as Yondu, who of course, was another villain in the first movie. Granted, a villain who comes to help the Guardians at the end to defeat Ronan the Accuser. But he is a bounty hunter. He's raised Peter Quill from a very early age to be a bounty hunter like him. But Quill ran away from Ravagers and chose a path of his own, a more noble path with the Guardian Galaxy. Sylvester Stallone makes an appearance here as the head of the Ravagers, right?
Yeah, that's the implication we get here, is that he is a very high-ranking member of the Ravagers. I'm not really sure what the Ravager political structure is like, but it is clear that he is in a higher position than that of Yondu, and that Stakar is now basically exiling Yondu, saying that this planet, this brothel, has lost the business of all the Ravager gangs except Yondu's. So now it's basically getting the message out that anywhere Yondu is served, the rest of the Ravagers will not be, bringing their business. So,
right.
And this is actually a really good scene because we get to see, Sylvester Stallone go into like full Judge Dredd mode here with, I am the law.
Absolutely. Good. I am the law. And you get to see, the ramifications of some of these story elements we saw in the first film, in that Yondu was hired by Ego to take young Peter Quill away from Earth, and he disobeyed those orders and kept him for himself as to raise as his own, to train as a Ravager, which violates the Ravager code, because in the eyes of Stallone's character, Yondu basically kidnapped a kid, and that's wrong, and they don't do that. That's something that even the Ravagers won't stoop to. But Yondu, as we find out during the course of the movie, had his own reasons for this from Earth.
Right.
If you kidnap a kid, that's, their code basically is that kids don't get involved. So.
This is a funny little visual gag here with the Sovereign. Because we're seeing her walking along on this carpet that's being wheeled out in front of her, and she has stopped, refusing to move until this one blade is like brushed out of the way.
Do you know what this scene needed, though, Nick?
What did it need, Greg?
She's your queen to be.
Oh man, where is that guy? What's he up to?
I don't know. I haven't seen that guy in quite some time. But I really feel like I feel like that whole scene reminded me of Coming to America in all the best ways, just with Blue Merle. Also, Kurt Russell is, let's just get into it here. phenomenal in this movie.
He really
Absolutely
is.
phenomenal as Ego. I mean, even his delivery here. Oh, another great Drax moment where he said, he's talking about he thought Yondu was Peter's dad, and Peter said no, and then he says, "You look just alike," and Rocket goes, "One of them's blue," and then he just kind of looks back at them and gives them this kind of nod in the direction, like, "Yeah, look at him." Almost a Dr. Kevin Nash like moment.
Yeah, he's really great. He's great throughout this film. But no, you were talking about Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell is outstanding. One thing that I'm sure we'll address as we go along throughout these Hard Travelers for Hires is that for a long time, Marvel got dinged for not having the most compelling villains, but pretty much from this one on, from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 forward, there has not been a bad Marvel villain since. And with the exception of Caecilius, I would argue there hasn't been one since the villain Yellow Jacket in Ant-Man. So it's been a really, really good run of villains for the Marvel Studios brand.
Yes, this is definitely a turning point for them where they go on to a role of just great villains. Where Ego, I think, is one of the best that they've had. And we talked about that with Guardians. It's another issue that in the first Guardians, there's not much that holds that movie back, honestly. It's so great in so many ways. And I think when we watched it, we both agreed that Ronan really didn't hold the movie back at all. But you would have to admit that Ronan was not a very compelling villain.
He wasn't, no.
They fixed that in this in a huge way and give us a Marvel villain who, yes, at the end of the day, Ego's motivation is he wants to control the universe. But the motivation is almost irrelevant in that he has motivation and also that it's capturing this over-the-top comic book character in Ego that you thought would be unable to capture, and imbuing him with a level of charisma that permeates throughout every single scene here. Kurt Russell is just a tour de force here where he can be genuine, and you're not really sure if he is being genuine or if he's just BSing to try to win Peter over to his side. But I think there is an element of humanity to Ego in this movie, and it's that element of humanity that all the great villains need. It was missing in Yellow Jacket. It was missing in Caecilius. It was missing in some of the early Marvel villains. And I think this is an example of this run of villains that have a humanity and a charisma to them, a marriage of those two things that is a difficult balance to strike. And yet Marvel struck gold in the form of Ego and continues to strike gold through to this day with their villains. I
agree completely with that. And here we get, we just got a name drop of David Hasselhoff that's going to set up one of the film's best cameos later in the movie. So, yeah, that was an important little bit of dialogue between Star-Lord and Gamora there. But no, Ego is great. A very different interpretation of Ego than we've ever seen in the comics, but one that serves to enhance the character while simultaneously keeping the major aspects of the comics character. So it's like having the best of both worlds.
And later in the film, we even get a visual nod, an homage to the comics version, where we see the face on Ego's planet. And we do find out that he is indeed a living planet.
Yes.
As at the center of the planet is his brain. We talked about Mantis, the other new addition to the cast, in addition to Ego and the Sovereign. Mantis is Ego's assistant here, and she actually comes on as this character that is so naive and so innocent that has been the definition of a sheltered life. We learn that she was taken as an orphan by Ego and literally has lived with no one but Ego her entire life. So she's extremely unaware of how to interact with others, a very kind-hearted entity that doesn't know how to fit in well. And so she instantly strikes a rapport with Drax, where he plays practical jokes on her and tries to insult her, even though she doesn't really understand the concept of insults very well. So, yeah.
One thing that we haven't really talked about too much, even though it's a major part of both films, is the soundtrack. And so right now we're hearing a little Fleetwood Mac, so it's a good time to stop and talk about that a little bit. these movies, if we're comparing it to the first one, I honestly think they're pretty damn close and hard to separate a whole lot of in terms of quality. One area, however, where I feel there's a decided advantage, and how I always have felt that way, is I like the soundtrack for Volume 1 a lot better than I like the soundtrack for Volume 2. That being said, I enjoyed the Volume 2 soundtrack much more on my most recent rewatch than I probably have on any of the viewings have had previous to this.
Oh, I love it. This is probably, of the recent Marvel movies, this is the one that I've probably seen the most. I've probably seen this 7 or 8 times at this point, and every time I enjoy the songs here, because while the first one, I think it was not novel to hear so many of these classic songs used in the way a great score might be in a film. In this one, we kind of were expecting it going in, and I think some of the choices were maybe songs that weren't as obvious as you might have thought going in. But of course, there are some great songs here. Fleetwood Mac, The Chain, George Harrison's My Sweet Lord. And then there are just other songs that just fit the scenes. The one thing about both these movies is the songs serve the film, not the other way around. I think that, we've all seen movies that come off more like music videos than movies, if that makes sense, where the movie is built around the music. And in this case, the music truly is built around the movie, fits the themes, the characters, the feel of each scene. I mean, it's gotten to the point where every time I hear Fleetwood Mac's The Chain on the radio, I think of this movie and the journey to Ego's planet. It's to your point, maybe not as consistent a soundtrack in terms of just pure song quality from beginning to end as the first movie, but I would say just as effective in how it serves the overall flow and structure of the film.
Yeah, and so we have just seen also the first example of Mantis showcasing her powers, helping Ego to sleep, being able to decipher emotions, and we also use it for one of the great gags in the movie that we saw in the trailers and the build up to it. So all good stuff here thus far.
Another I'm glad about the trailers. We haven't really talked about the trailer of this movie. This had some of Marvel movies in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. Trailers for this were outstanding. But the trailers for the first movie were outstanding as well. Something about James Gunn, he just knows how to market his movies and how to get people excited to see them, and this was no exception.
Yeah. Here's another awesome scene in a lot of them. We haven't really mentioned an important part of this movie who will end up being part of the Guardians by the end of the film, and that's the character of Kraglin. Who was a minor character at best in the first film, one of the Ravagers who works for, of course, Yondu right now, and he's somebody who mainly has been used for comedy relief. Although in this movie he gets a lot bigger role than he did in the first one.
Absolutely. Sean Gunn was the unsung hero of the first film as he stood in for Rocket Raccoon and performed the motion capture, and has actually been credited with a lot of Rocket's more well-known bits of improv. For example, in the first one, the line about, "Here we are, a bunch of idiots standing in a circle," that was an improv line by Sean Gunn. And so I think, he had kind of earned an expanded role, and he gets the opportunity to do that here, and absolutely knocks it out of the park. And we're going to see him a little bit more in this one. But hey, man, let's pause a moment to talk about what a great action sequence set to, of all things, Glenn Campbell's Southern Nights.
I was going to bring this up, Nick, because I figured this scene would speak to your personal music.
Yes, it does. Little Glenn Campbell, good stuff. And Southern Nights, it would have been easy to go Rhinestone Cowboy, but they went Southern Nights instead. So big pop for me for that one.
Let's derail this Guardians of the Galaxy podcast. Talk about 60s and 70s for a minute, Nick. The Nashville sound, if you will.
Yeah. Or the Bakersfield sound, if you want to talk a little Buck Owens, depending on which
Buck
direction
Owens,
you want to take it.
Absolutely. who would later record the song "Streets of Bakersfield" with Dwight Yoakam, of course, back in the '80s.
Dwight Yoakam, of course, who would notoriously nail Tanya Tucker in a three-way with Lyle Lovett.
With apparently attractive Lyle Lovett.
Oh, the most hideous three-way of all time.
Good Lord. Although, it is fun to think about Dwight Yoakam as his character from that song.
Yes, and Lyle Lovett. Just as Lyle Lovett.
Just as Lyle Lovett. Suddenly, that song becomes one of the great horror songs in country music history.
I would agree. I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
It's that and Billy Joe McAllister jumping off the whatever bridge it is.
The Tallahatchie Bridge.
Oh yeah. Anyway, this is a great action scene, and we get the introduction of probably my favorite non-Mjolnir, non-Infinity Gauntlet object in the MCU, and that is Yondu's. God, what do you call this? What is this even called?
It's an arrow.
Spear?
Arrow? He refers to it as an arrow later in the film when he says that he doesn't fly it with his head, So, yeah, the arrow we only saw in like one scene in the first movie, and it was awesome. And here we get to see it a couple of times, and it's as great as it was there. I'm not really sure how the whole thing works, or why other people don't just use them, but man, it's awesome that Yondu has it. It's
incredible, and it's like just from a visual standpoint, it's one of the coolest weapons in the MCU, and the way that it's demonstrated in this movie, it makes it not quite omnipotent, but it makes it pretty damn unstoppable when it gets going. And I think the implication is given in the movie that Yondu has a special connection to it, and it's almost, it bonds to its user in a way similar. I look at it, maybe I'm wrong, Nick, but I look at it as being kind of similar to a Green Lantern ring in that regard, where the user has to have a connection to it in order for it to work.
Yeah, I guess that must be it, because I think later in the post-credit scenes, we'll see Kraglin trying to use it and it not going well, but he's at least able to get it to go up in the air and stuff. So maybe with a little practice, anybody can use it. I don't know. Not really sure what the implication is here.
And we also meet Taserface for the very first time in this scene.
And Taserface will provide great comedic fodder for Rocket Raccoon here in a little bit.
Now, who is this other guy? No, that's what I was going to ask you about, Nick, when I was watching the most recent time. I don't remember if this guy was in the first movie or not. The one guy that seems to be on Yondu's side in every dispute, and he later gets killed by being tossed off into space.
Which guy? I'm not sure.
You'll see him in a second.
Either way, I don't remember him from the first movie.
Yeah, I was just not sure if that had been established or not, but he stands by the captain's side and pays dearly for it with a space death. And here's another great scene where they arrive on Yondu's planet, set to "My Sweet Lord" by George Harrison. Again, incredible, inspiring visuals here by James Gunn. You're going to see these very colorful bubbles, just this incredibly colorful world that looks dramatically different from anything else we've ever seen in Guardians. And that's something that I think, for us, Nick, probably speaks to us in these movies, is our mutual love of Star Wars, our mutual love of Green Lantern, our mutual love even of something like Saga. Part of that is the world building, right? Mm-hmm. Part of that is how everything looks. Ideally, these worlds and these planets should all look different. Yep. Should all stand out from one another. And I think that's something that both of these Guardians movies maybe tap into us from our own childhoods, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's something we've always wanted to see realized on screen, like you mentioned Green Lantern. One of the great failings of the one Green Lantern movie we've gotten is that there was no world building. We saw Oa and we saw Earth, and that was all we saw, whereas these Guardians movies bring to you a multitude of worlds and settings and locales, a multitude of races, and it's just, it throws a lot at you, but doesn't do so in an overly expository fashion. It just expects you to accept that there is a very diverse universe out there, and either you can go with it or you can't. And for people like us who are pre-inclined to go along with this, it really winds up working and being visually stunning, as this whole Ego planet sequence winds up being.
Indeed. So there's a lot going on this Ego planet. You've got a fountain of what appear to be fish going up in a spiral pattern. So clearly Ego controls everything that's going on this world. And we're about to lead to what I know, Nick, is one of your favorite exchanges involving Drax, Ego, and Star-Lord.
Yeah, we're going to have a little talk about Ego's penis. I mean, which was also, something that was out there we knew might happen in the movie. I think it was screened at Comic-Con one summer, but winds up playing huge here in the context of the film. And here
as you can see,
here we're going to get a little bit of the explanation of Ego and his origin, how he came to be. So,
of course, keeping out some minor details.
Yeah, just minor details, of course.
Ego's right beside me with his hand up on my thigh.
That's all you've been thinking about for the last 10 minutes, isn't it?
It is. I can't get that song out of my head, Nick. Mm-hmm. And you know why I can't get that song out of my head? I guess it's just got to be because...
Hot dog, you feel lucky tonight?
I feel lucky tonight.
I knew where you were going. You can't lead me down any road that I don't know the ending to.
Well, I guess I'm just getting too old, Nick. But you know what? No matter how old I get, I don't need no rocking chair.
Your Geritol or your Medicare. And there, he was, of course, sure to give it the perfectly coiffed hair, this little model of himself he just built.
Yes, and the chin. You cannot underestimate the power of the chin.
Drax, with a great line, if he is a planet, how could he make a movie with a baby with your mother? He would smush her.
Smush her. And then there it is. There's that nod, that knowing look from Drax as Ego says, I have a penis. I do have a penis. And it's not half bad. And then the look from Drax as if to say, oh, do tell.
Well, I mean, if he was able to make his own body, wouldn't he, probably, I think we're probably talking like a roll of bologna down there, right?
Well, he would certainly give himself the ability to pull a Lanny Poffo. I think we can agree on that. I
think we would have a Black Scorpion at the St. Louis Marriott type deal going on.
Nick, who's got your favorite penis and why is it Ego?
Well, it's either Ego, Ric Flair, or Tom Zink.
Tom Zink. A handsome young man.
He was a handsome young man.
No, nonetheless, penises aside, we are getting a lot of information here about Star-Lord's creation and how he was birthed not in a Kryptonian matrix pod, but indeed in his mother's womb by Ego. And again, though, he is leaving out some important details here that will play a factor in probably the movie's best non-comedic scenes later on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we'll get to it, in the course of this podcast or not to watch the scene, but, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this podcast, and we're assuming that you've seen Guardians of the Galaxy.
You've already seen the movie, right?
Volume 2, so we're not going to feel bad about spoiling things, but later on in the film, it's going to be revealed that Ego actually infected Peter's mother with brain cancer, put a tumor on her head prior to leaving her so that he would not be tempted to come back. And the moment where Chris Pratt finds that out is one of the best acted moments in all of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. It would be up there in a top 5 for me, probably. It's outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is as great as he was in Guardians of the Galaxy, and he was great. This is the moment to me that Chris Pratt arrived as a serious actor, not just a comedic actor, because he's funny throughout this movie. But in that scene, that is a level of acting that is hard to pull off because it's not the words. It doesn't matter what he says at that point. It's in his face. The look he gets on his face the minute that Ego says the word tumor. It literally, I'm not going to lie, Nick, it broke my heart in the theater when he said it. Like, just like that look on his face, like the look of somebody that is just crushed. Mm-hmm. And then it turns to anger so quickly. And again, I know we don't want to apply future knowledge, but does it not also make his reaction in Infinity War make all that much more sense?
It kind of does, a little bit, you know. We see him lashing out angrily whenever he finds these things out. So, yeah,
he's very emotionally immature in a lot of ways, and so his first reaction when he finds out about this is to pull out his guns and try to shoot a god.
Yes, he does.
It doesn't make logical sense. He has to know it's not going to work, but he does it because he has to have a way to express this emotional devastation that he's just gone through.
Absolutely.
So it's such an incredible scene. It's one of the best scenes in the MCU for my money. It worked on me in the theater, and it's worked on me every successive time that I've seen it. So let's run down as
it's a metaphor. What a great scene.
Yes. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about here, Taserface now is being relentlessly mocked by Rocket for his name being Taserface, which is a great example of both James Gunn and Marvel
and here in a minute,
taking the piss out of themselves a little bit.
And here we go with Bradley Cooper doing a wonderful impression of the dude playing Taserface. You know what?
Taserface.
Oh, that's good.
Vince McMahon doing it. Quite frankly, your name is going to be Taserface.
Scrotum hat. Anyway.
So yeah, let's go through the actors here and talk about their performances. We've talked about Chris Pratt. We've talked about a little bit. We'll go into him a little bit more. We talked about Kurt Russell, of course. Drax by Dave Bautista. We talked a little bit about Bradley Cooper's continuing improving performance as Rocket. What do we make here of Gamora as played by Zoe Saldana?
I would say she's one of the few characters who it feels like more of the same, but I would also argue that she's one of the characters, you know, granted she has to become closer to the Guardians themselves, but she was pretty close to fully formed there in that first Guardians movie. Like, she is pretty intent on getting out from under her father's, her from Thanos and Ronan's shadow, from under their rule early on in Guardians, and she's not got really any intention in going back. So her motivations kind of remain consistent across both movies, but here we get to see her bond to the team a little more. It's clear that she and Baby Groot have developed something of a special relationship in between films and stuff. So she does well, and I think they give her and Karen Gillan's Nebula more to do with each other. You know, more meteor scenes, and they both excel at those. So thumbs up for both of those characters.
Yes, I thought. I think that this movie it actually gives her a little bit more agency than the first one did in terms of she gets her own dedicated subplot here, and to face a lot of emotional moments here with her sister. But yeah, a lot more of the same. But I think they did develop her character here and give her more to do. Make her more of even though Rocket and Star-Lord argue about who's the leader of the team, it really feels like Gamora is the one that when push comes to shove, she's going to be calling the shots. Mm-hmm. Since you brought her up, Karen Gillan as Nebula does a great job in this movie, and I think she is one of the biggest improvements from the first one to this one. Not that she was bad in the first one, but she had a very one-dimensional character in the first one, much like Ronan. And here we see the subtlety of her character and the nuance, and particularly the scene where she and Gamora come together and come to a sort of mutual understanding. She has a chance to finally kill Gamora, and she chooses not to, and just wants her to admit that she's won finally. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit of a Loki Thor dynamic, but it's not a situation where Nebula is an egomaniac on the level of a Loki, or a situation of Nebula some form of payback for what she's been through in her life, and or easier than us as far as targets go. Ultimately, you realize that there is a love between these two sisters.
Yes, that is where you get to by the end of the film. But like I said, they're both really good. I think we touched on Kurt Russell, we touched on Chris Pratt, we touched on Batista, Bradley Cooper, we touched on Yondu a little bit. But I mean, just suffice it to say that Michael Rooker is outstanding in this film and winds up becoming the unexpected emotional heart of it in ways that you didn't really see coming in. And later on in the film, especially his scenes with Chris Pratt just absolutely tug at the heartstrings. So you had Big Dave as your MVP of the film, but mine is going to be Michael Rooker.
Very good, a very worthy MVP indeed. He's outstanding here, and I the scenes at the end with Yondu, very unexpected to me going into the movie. I never would have expected Yondu to A, be such an important character, and B, to make me care about him on such a level. But that father-son dynamic of Star-Lord and Yondu, and up to the death scene that we see at the end with Yondu, as he's flying up in the sky, and he tells him, Ego might have been your father, but he ain't your daddy. Mm-hmm. That whole, back 10 minutes of the movie, or 15 minutes of the movie, made theater, and even watching it yesterday, I was welling up, and it got to me in a big way. I don't even know if I'd say it might be the most emotional moment in the MCU for me, and I never would have expected that for two characters in Star-Lord and Yondu that I have, as you know, Nick, zero attachment to in comics.
Yeah, I mean it's great. It's such an amazing job by Marvel of getting you, and James Gunn, of getting you to care about these characters and getting you to buy this father-son dynamic between a human and a blue-skinned alien. Just outstanding. Another example of not everything needs to be grounded and realistic. You know, as long as it's done well, people will go with you on that journey.
If you build it, they will come like fire.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And, of course, is a new character here. What do you make of Mantis, Nick? I thought she was another example of somebody that really embodies the character that she's playing, and I think they made her sufficiently different from the rest of the cast to avoid that age-old comics issue on teams of characters that seem to serve the same purpose, you know?
Yeah, I don't know anything about Mantis in the comics, but I will say that, like you, I felt like she was different enough, served a distinct enough role, and most importantly, she's a new character that they don't overload you with here in this movie. They don't give her too much so that she overshadows the existing characters. She is a new character that is added in just the right amount, serves her role well, has numerous humorous scenes and interactions with especially Dave Bautista's Drax. Just a great character that they added in here all around.
Numerous humorous.
Mm-hmm.
And with all that being said, this has kind of been all over the place, Nick, because it's one of those movies that we both love, and there's really not a lot of room for us to disagree on because we pretty much see the movie the same way. And it's been a great ride. And for those of you who haven't checked it out, it is available on Netflix, as all of the Marvel movies are now at some point available on Netflix. The ones that, starting with Civil War, everyone from then on, you can find on Netflix. That's how I'm watching it right now. But it's definitely worth going out of your way to watch if you haven't. I would say see the first one to set.
Actually, I don't think that's true. I don't think Homecoming is on there.
Really? Interesting.
I don't believe that it is.
Is that due to the Sony connection, perhaps?
I think so, probably. But, because they just added Thor Ragnarok, but I'm reasonably sure that Homecoming is not on there, so there is one missing gap in there.
Interesting.
And actually, that makes sense because Sony was able to control distribution of the film, if I recall correctly. So
yeah. Interesting. Well, nonetheless, Guardians 2 is on there, Ragnarok's on there, Civil War's on there. Check them out. They're all good. And this one in particular really stands out to me. The characters are great. The action is great. The story is terrific. The post-credit scenes, you mentioned David Hasselhoff. I won't spoil any more than that. But pretty much all the post-credit scenes are terrific, even though they're not what you would call essential scenes, right? They're just kind of supplemental material. But there is one scene that introduces a character that we've just read a lot of, Nick. Mm-hmm. It is a certain feather-haired character who played quite a role in Marvel's cosmic side, and that is Adam Warlock. He is seemingly introduced at the very end of the movie, in the end credits, from the leader of the Sovereign, as her people's greatest creation and their next evolution. So what do you make of that? Are you looking forward to seeing Adam Warlock in the future, Nick?
You know, I don't really have a strong feeling one way or the other about Adam Warlock. I was not reading comics in the 90s when it was kind of his heyday. I know he plays major role in Infinity Gauntlet, but I was never one of those people who was clamoring to see Adam Warlock introduced just because I didn't know much about him. So I think you and our good friend Tim Capel are probably much more into the idea of Adam Warlock playing a major role than I am.
Well, what's interesting, I have no, or no misconceptions about how, kind of one note and boring Adam Warlock can be. But I also know that it opens the door for other things and also has potential there. But mainly, I just want to see what actor can pull off Adam Warlock hair, or if they even try it. Yeah,
you have these weird attachments to comic book accurate hair that I'm afraid you're going to be sorely disappointed on.
It's the most important thing.
It's not really important at all, I would argue.
Yes. No, it is the most. There are two things that are important in comics when you're converting them to the big screen. Number two is having the heart of the character, the basic, I guess, understanding of why that character works and what makes him or her operate. But number one is the hair.
Yeah, I think I would disagree with that, but that's fair. Fair enough, I suppose.
And that's why, Nick, despite everything, that's why there's still room for a better Wolverine than Hugh Jackman. Because somebody can pull off that hair even better than he did.
If you say so, Greg.
And I do. So, final thoughts on this one, Nick. I thought it was, one of my favorites in the MCU. Certainly of to this point in our journey of Hard Travelers for Hire. It's definitely a standout to me.
Yeah, I would agree. It's up there. It's one of those movies that sets out to accomplish certain goals and hits pretty much every mark it sets out to hit. Hard to find too much to dislike with this one. If you're gonna pick very minor quibbles, the only complaint I have about this movie structurally is that I hate it whenever they split up the team. I know they do it in Empire Strikes Back, which is kind of what this movie feels like it's trying to sort of do. But I would have rather had the Guardians together on screen for more time. But again, that is only if I am searching for things to nitpick. Overall, not really too much to complain about with this one here.
Very good. So, all that being said, it's time to get to the rankings portion of this episode. Now, what we do is we count down a weighted critic score for each of these movies. We use the Rotten Tomato critic score, the Metacritic score, and the IMDb score. We average them together, and we give you the rankings based on those averages. So, Nick, take it away with the critical and fan reception to these movies and the rankings thereof.
Is that you want to go from top to bottom or bottom to top?
Your call.
Let's see, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, so 15 movies into this point. We'll start with 15. At 15, with 190 out of a possible 300 points, is still Thor the Dark World. At 14 is The Incredible Hulk with 196 points. 13, Iron Man 2 with 200 points. 12, Thor with 204 points. 11, Iron Man 3 with 214 points. A tie for 9th between Avengers Age of Ultron and Captain America the First Avenger with 215 points. 8th is Ant-Man with 219. 7th is where we're going to find Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So right directly in the middle, Greg. I know that's going to be interesting to you especially, considering what it ranks behind, because while Guardians of the Galaxy has 227 points, at number 6 we have Doctor Strange with 236 points. At number 5 we have Captain America the Winter Soldier with 237. At number 4 we have The Avengers with 242 points. At number 3, we have Captain America Civil War with 244 points. At number 2, we have Guardians of the Galaxy with 248 points. And still at number 1, the reigning champion, Iron Man, with 252 points.
Interesting rankings, to say the least. What can I say? We really went over that in the last episode, though, about both of us kind of being somewhat befuddled by the critical scores for Doctor Strange. Even if the reviews themselves were not as effusive as they were for some other movies, the numbers just add up to give it an advantage over, or a big advantage over some of the other Marvel movies that I think the two of us preferred. Yeah,
even the Metacritic score, which takes into account the tenor of each review a little bit more accurately than Rotten Tomatoes does. Even Metacritic has it ahead of, has it ahead of The Avengers, has it ahead of Winter Soldier. The only Marvel movies to this point in our project that have been behind Doctor Strange in terms of Metacritic score, or ahead of Doctor Strange in terms of Metacritic score exclusively, are Civil War, Guardians, and Iron Man. So at this point, Metacritic actually has it number 4 on the list, which is remarkable.
I gotta say, you say remarkable, I gotta say, that's pretty strange.
I see what you did there.
And now what we're going to do is give you our rankings of these films up to this point in our journey through the MCU. I don't think I mentioned this from the top, did I, Nick? That this is our movie-by-movie journey through the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So up to this point, I guess I will go first and give you my rankings. And this is what, 1 through 15, you said, Nick?
Yeah, we have 15. So if you want to go 1 to 15 or 15 to 1, your choice.
I'll go 15 to 1.
Okay.
At number 15, Doctor Strange.
Mm-hmm.
At number 14, The Incredible Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
At number 13, Thor: The Dark World. At number 12, Thor. At number 11, Captain America, the First Avenger. At number 10, Hank Ant-Man. At number 9, Iron Man. At number 8, Iron Man 3. At number 7, Iron Man 2. At number 6, Avengers: Age of Ultron. At number 5, Guardians of the Galaxy. At number 4, The Avengers. At number 3, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. At number 2, Captain America the Winter Soldier. And at number 1, Captain America Civil War.
Thank you for that, Regis Philbin.
Who wants to be a millionaire?
No, that's the same impression, Greg. It's the same one.
When I created Doctor Strange, at the very least, it's a better Stan Lee than yours was on Marvel Age Podcast, available right now on PlaceToBeNationPop.com in the archives.
No, don't go to PlaceToBeNation.com or PlaceToBeNationPop.com, seeing as how that website doesn't exist. What was that? Listen to you. You're the one telling people to go to a website that does not exist.
I'm telling people not to go to PlaceToBeNation.com. Our sponsors, our benefactors.
That's because there are multiple places to find it. They could also find it on various podcast feeds, but if they try to go to PlaceToBeNationPop.com, they're not going to find anything.
But if they try to go to PlaceToBeNation.com, they will, but you just told them not to.
That's right.
they're just going to give up. Where else can they find it, Nick? Where are some of these other podcasts?
I would not go to placetobenation.com for fear of running into certain other podcasts like, I don't know, never mind, we'll just leave that for another day.
Oh, my. Good Lord. Shots fired at our benefactors.
It was a joke, Greg, for God's sake.
I don't know. It sounded to me like we were shooting from the hip there.
There you are, stirring the pot again.
That's what they call me. They call me the pot stirrer. That's how I got my reputation. I am the one true gadfly of placetobenation.com.
Nobody says that anymore. In any event.
So, you can also find Marvel Age Podcast in iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, I think. No, I made that up. Probably not. But maybe in the future.
But the point is, Greg, I don't pride myself on my impressions the way you do. And while you're usually good, all I'm saying is that one was not up to your usual standards. I think you have a better one in you.
All that I'm saying, Nick, is yours sounded exactly like your Rorschach taunters from Place to Be Nation Comic Book Theater, which is also found right now in our archives.
Again, I don't pride myself on my impressionistic skills.
You're dead, Rorschach. Dead.
That's right.
You hear me? You're dead.
That's right. That's all I got. In any event, now that we have heard Greg's inferior list, let's go to a better one. At 15, Ant-Man.
Lame.
At 14, Iron Man 3.
Horrible decision.
At 13, The Incredible Hulk.
Bad decision.
At 12, Thor the Dark World. At 11, Doctor Strange. At 10, Iron Man 2. At 9, Captain America the First Avenger.
You gotta be shitting me. No, I'm kidding.
At 8, Thor. At 7, Iron Man. And here's where it got interesting, because I think, to me, the first one and this one are so incredibly close. And on my first few viewings, I had the first one slightly ahead. But this recent rewatch just I don't know, something about it pushed it over the top. So I'm going to go at number 6, Guardians of the Galaxy. At number 5, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And then a top 4 of The Avengers at 4, Avengers Age of Ultron at 3, Captain America Civil War at 2, and Captain America the Winter Soldier at number 1.
See, you could have made the argument that your list was superior until you had Age of Ultron ranked ahead of the original Avengers and both Guardians of the Galaxy.
Again, you have Age of Ultron in your top 6, so I'm not even going to deign to have this discussion with you.
I like Age of Ultron, but I don't love it.
I
like it a lot.
You also have the Iron Man sequels above the first Iron Man, which no one else does.
No, that is not accurate. Glenn Butler does as well.
Yeah, well, no one, yeah.
And I stand by it. But nonetheless, those are our lists, folks, and we want to hear yours. Reach out to us through, Nick, any number of ways they can communicate with us. On Twitter, I am at gphillips8652. Mm-hmm. That is GPHILLIPS 8652. You are at Nick Duke 87, NICKDUKE 87. You can join the Place to Be Nation Comics Facebook page. We've had a lot of discussion there lately, Nick. A lot of cool threads going on.
Absolutely. Various Place to Be Nation compatriots learning comics, and so interesting threads there. Just good stuff all around over on that page right now. Absolutely.
Some 3, 4, and even 4.5 star threads to be found at Place to Be Nation Comics on Facebook. You can find Brad Warren's ongoing trek through various Marvel titles on Marvel Unlimited. That is always interesting flashback and everything to go through. You can also reach out to us through email. The loneliest email addresses on the internet. Nick D at placetobenation.com, Greg P at placetobenation.com. If you give us feedback, we'll try to remember to mention it on the show. This one's going to be difficult because it's been like 2 weeks since we've actually recorded, not to tell tales out of school, but the halfies were recorded a little bit in advance of when we actually put them out, which I would recommend you go listen to as well. And other than that, we are back in the flow of things, though, Nick, after a fun week of rest and relaxation, I'm sure, in both of our households. Now we're back into the swing of things. We're getting back to work for our listeners. And so when we come back from the break, we will have reading, we will have watching, and we will have the rundown for you. So stay with us. I know you will.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, pro wrestling announcer Kevin Kelly here. I want to make sure you are all subscribed to all the great feeds here at Place to Be Nation. It's really easy to do. Just head to iTunes or your preferred podcatcher app today and search and subscribe to the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, which of course includes the full archives of the Kevin Kelly Show, the Place to Be Nation pod feed, and the Pro Wrestling Only feed. Subscribe, listen, and then rate us and leave feedback today. And be sure to give Justin your true thoughts. I mean, don't hold back. After all, he is kind of a jerk. Just listen to Scott.
Place to Be Nation's JT Rosero and Chad Campbell here. We want to let you know that we have a ton of great podcasts available to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlaceToBeNation.com. We offer them to you on two great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, we bring you the Mothership, the Place to Be podcast, along with Main Event, Survey Says, the Monday Night Wars, and our monthly pay-per-view reaction show, as well as Jeff Learns Wrestling. In addition to these full-length shows, we also deliver special network podcasts and pod blasts on topics old and new.
Over on the Pro Wrestling Only feed, we dive deep inside the wrestling business with a stacked army of experts leading the way. The feed features potpourri shows such as This Week in Wrestling, Greetings from Allentown, Match of the Week podcast, and the Military Industrial Suplex. We also have shows that focus intently on certain topics like Through the Years, Worldcast, Strong Style History, Strong Style Story, and Mount Olympus. Plus, the feed has the full archives of legendary shows like Titans of Wrestling, Where the Big Boys Play, Letters from Center Stage, and Letters from Kayfabe, plus much more. And on our very popular Place to Be Nation Pop podcast feed, we offer such great shows as Talkin' Pop, the Glenn Butler Podcast Hour Spectacular, NBA Team, PTB and Play, Sunday Groove, Breaking Balls, and Lucha Undead.
As well as a veritable podcast heaven for comics fans.
With the Hard-Traveling Fanboys, Sellers Points, Todd Weber's Conversations, Geek and Sassy, and Marvel Age podcasts.
You can find all of these current shows, plus archives of our past podcasts, including The Kevin Kelly Show, as well by subscribing to both feeds on iTunes. And while there, be sure to rate and leave feedback today. All these shows, plus others, available at PlaceToBeNation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus in-depth stretch projects, and more. Be sure to support our site by using PlaceToBeNation.com/Amazon when doing your online shopping, and download our free PTB Vintage Vault Refresh ebooks via the links on our site. We also want to thank our friends at Boneheads Wing Bar in West Warwick, Rhode Island, and Fall River, Massachusetts, and thehistoryofwrestling.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr as well. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Thank you for rejoining us. We are so thankful to have you, our loyal, wonderful listeners, back for the second half of our show. Nick, how was the break for you?
Oh, it was great. I got an opportunity to get a little swig of almond milk and a glass of water. So just living my best life over here.
Absolutely. Now, was it almond milk or almond milk?
It was almond milk.
No, that's your opinion.
No, it's not. That's a fact.
My opinion is that it's time, Nick. It's time.
Yes. For
our weekly look at the news and notes in the world of comics. That's right, Nick. It's time for a little segment that we like to call the following.
Welcome to the rundown, where we talk some comic news. Welcome to the rundown, where we talk about movies too.
That's right, it's the rundown. Oh, Nick,
good Lord, we had to milk that one, didn't we?
We've just got a litany of topics to talk about here.
Indeed we do. Indeed we do.
And we are going to milk them, Nick. I'm glad you said that word, because we are going to suckle at the teat of the news cycle and milk out only the most nutritious morsels for our listeners? Huh?
I guess. I don't know.
Huh?
I don't think so. No.
Nevertheless, Andrew Lincoln kicks us off this week, Nick. What I think and what I believe is the biggest news in the ancillary world of comics in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Probably the biggest news in quite some time, given the one-time ratings juggernaut that The Walking Dead was.
Yes, we have talked at length about our mutual disgust with the season finale of The Walking Dead and how it skewed closely to the comic books in keeping certain characters living versus other characters, and how in our opinion, it had skewed too closely to the comics, and irreparably so. Well, a huge change is coming, if you believe the void coming out of the Hollywood publications, which is that The Walking Dead lead star Andrew Lincoln, who plays Rick Grimes and has since season 1 all the way back in 2011, I believe it was, maybe even farther back than that. Nonetheless, Andrew Lincoln is leaving the show, according to Collider. According to the report, Lincoln will appear in just 6 episodes of The Walking Dead Season 9. And as a side effect of that, they're in need of a new lead character. And with that being said, Norman Reedus, who plays Daryl Dixon, my favorite character on The Walking Dead, is negotiating a $20 million plus deal to become The Walking Dead's new lead. That's right, Daryl will be stepping in and replacing Rick, if the rumors are to be believed, as the quote-unquote lead of a show that has really become more of an ensemble over the years. Huge surprise here. I did not see this coming. In the comic books, of course, Rick survives into, however many hundreds of issues they're in now on The Walking Dead. So this is undoubtedly a monkey wrench in the plans of Robert Kirkman and company, yes?
Yeah, I would have to think so. I don't know what this is all about. I don't know if it's Andrew Lincoln wanting to leave of his own volition, just getting tired of being attached to the show, or if there's some sort of dispute monetarily between the two parties. I have no idea what this is all about. But I will say that while I find this interesting and think it will shake up the show, I still am not going back. Like, this is, the show is still going to be written by and large by the same people. I know that technically they have a new showrunner, but that's only because Scott Gimple is now going to be overseeing the entire Walking Dead universe, whatever the hell that means. So he'll still have a hand in crafting the same repetitive and shitty storylines and nonsensical directions for characters that he's done for the better part of 2 years now. So while, Greg, I know you have said this is enough to bring you back, I'm not signing up for this fool's errand, and I will, of course, watch the season finale to maintain the continuity.
You mean premiere?
So yeah, season premiere, excuse me, to maintain the continuity of Walking Dead month, and then that will be it for me.
Which for you, I guess it will be the season finale. It'll be the premiere and the finale all in one.
All in one, yep. Maybe they'll kill Rick off right from the get-go.
Wouldn't that be something?
Wouldn't it?
But they won't, because this show doesn't believe in doing anything up front. It believes in milking things until they're beaten into the ground.
But this is enough. You've said that you're back. You're back now.
Well, and by the way, way to steal my thunder on that. You are relaying off. How would you refer to this? Off headset conversations and relaying them to the listening public without their knowledge ahead of time, and have spoiled the thunder that yes, Nick, this is enough to get me back. I am going to give the show a shot next year, unless the season premiere is just so bad and so irredeemably bad that it leaves me with no hope for the future, then yes, I am going to come back to see how they kill off Rick Grimes, or just do away with him. Maybe they won't kill him, I don't know. But to see how Rick Grimes is written off the show, to see how Daryl is written back into prominence after 2 seasons in a row in which I felt he was underutilized. Interesting to see how their current plan and what they, we talked about their very frustrating story direction they appeared to be heading in at the end of this season. I'm curious how they can reconcile that with a Rick death. And I'm
which is
curious
probably
how
my greatest concern, honestly, about Rick dying, is that it's going to come at the hands of a certain character, and that it's not going to make any level of sense.
I'll tell you how they should do it.
Negan should
Are
kill
you
him?
interested? Yes.
Yeah.
And then someone should kill Negan.
Yep. I would agree with that. Now, do you think that's actually going to happen?
No, of course not.
Then why are you going back?
Because I feel like I have to see it through. I have to see it through to see, because like I said, I still enjoy the acting on the show. I still enjoy some of the characters. Daryl, Carol, Maggie, Morgan, who's on another show now, Ezekiel, Jerry, Eugene, not Tara, Rosita. And I think that exhausts the list. And Aaron's okay. But I'm going to come back. I'm going to see what happens. But no, don't act like I'm going into this blindly optimistic. I'm not. I'm not going into this expecting that the show is suddenly going to find a suitable pace for a season, or that the writers are going to write their characters consistently from episode to episode, or even indeed that the show will be able to fix its problems with never paying off the promises they make early in story arcs. But I do think that at least the characters that will be getting the focus will be characters I'm interested in. And if I have to see a character nod slowly, looking off into the distance, or huff and puff and speak in hushed whispers in a southern accent, I'd rather it be Daryl at this point than Rick. No knock on Andrew Lincoln, by the way.
Is there a concern at all that making Daryl the lead will lead the writers to change his character in ways that don't really make sense for Daryl?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, there's concerns there. Yes. To the degree that there's concerns that every character on the show could be at a moment's notice. And by the time, who knows what they're going to be like when we start next season, Nick? I mean, by God, Carol could be living in the mountains as a lumberjack. We have no idea, because these characters go through wild changes in the off season for no adequately explained reason.
Mm-hmm.
But that is neither here nor there. Another unexpected bit of news that just came out close to our publication, Nick, not publication, close to our recording, is a shocker to me anyway, and that is news that Wally West, played by Keenan Lonsdale, will not be back as Kid Flash on... that's right, Kid Flash, as played by Keenan Lonsdale, will not be back as Kid Flash on DC's Legends of Tomorrow Season 4. Of course, he was a series regular this year on Legends. It does say that he will be back among the cast of The Flash for the 5th season premiere, so his time in the DC universe may not be over. But I gotta say, Nick, we talked about this last week, but I was pretty convinced that he was going to be a permanent fixture on Legends of Tomorrow. Were you not?
Yeah, I was as well, and I'm not really... It's a little weird to me that they would have bumped him up to series regular only for the back half of Season 3 of Legends, and then he's gone again before Season 4 ever begins. Very odd. But it does lend a little bit of credence to the fact that I think that Season 5 of The Flash, based on what we saw in the season finale, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, is going to feature the West and Allen family trees pretty extensively. And so I wonder if perhaps this is not strictly for a storytelling reason rather than a chemistry reason.
I think it very well could be. And I think it also goes to further illustrate that Legends is going to have a fluid roster. Remember, they told us this when they started the show. Berlanti and company and Guggenheim said that Legends of Tomorrow will have a much more fluid roster than any of the other shows they've attempted to this point. And I guess this is going to prove it as Constantine comes in and Kid Flash goes out. But still, interesting nonetheless. And nevertheless, I am struggling to pull back up my list of stories here. There we go. Jeff Johns, a creator that both of us are fond of in some manner, recently sent out an image on his Facebook account, and I believe on Twitter as well. But it was just the numbers. Actually, I can't remember what it was. Nick, tell the people what it was.
What's that?
What Jeff Johns recently sent out as an image. As my
yes, the image, an image with the letters WW followed by the number 84. So most people are taking this as an implication that Wonder Woman, the Wonder Woman sequel is officially titled Wonder Woman 84 and will take place, and you guessed it, 1984.
Yes, a great year, 1984. The birth year of Ghostbusters. Huey Lewis and the News, I believe, hit the charts with sports that year. Van Halen had an album titled 1984. And, of course, 1984 birthed the greatest of the hard-traveling fanboys, Greg Phillips.
In your opinion?
Indeed. No, it is definitely my opinion that Greg Phillips was born in 1984. No question about that. It's also my opinion that Jared Leto's take on the Joker was uninteresting and dull and not worth revisiting. However, clearly executives at Warner Brothers Entertainment disagree with me because a report came out that according to said report from Variety, Jared Leto has signed on to star and executive produce a standalone Joker film branching out of his role in 2016's Suicide Squad.
But apparently this is not going to affect the status of the other standalone Joker movie that is being made by Martin Scorsese and Todd Phillips, with Joaquin Phoenix attached to the role.
That's right. So this is part of a continuing plan to spin out of the Suicide Squad movie with other side movies, without actually doing a Suicide Squad 2 yet. In addition, they also want to launch their new line of unrelated movies by doing a Joker movie, the one that Nick just mentioned, with Joaquin Phoenix as the star. So obviously, two questions are begged here. Oh, and we didn't even preface it, Nick. Gosh, this is our mistake. This is your favorite portion of the rundown and ours. Folks, we're in the DCEU corner.
Yeah, too late for the jingle, but we're just going to move ahead anyway.
Exactly. This is a mess of a situation, and two questions arise here. Does this movie ever even happen? First of all. Second of all, does it need to happen?
I want to say no on both questions. Neither. It will not happen. Sadly, I think the Scorsese thing is going to wind up happening because it just feels like something that's inevitable. But no, I don't think this other one winds up happening, and I think that will be for the best. However, I would add a third question. If it does happen, and that shows that they're okay with multiple versions of characters, can we finally get the stupid embargo lifted off of the TV universe?
Oh, you mean how the TV shows can't use the Joker or Batman or Deathstroke or Deadshot or God, who the hell else? Any number of characters, Lex Luthor. That ignorant. It should be lifted. Hey, and listen, Nick, if getting a Jared Leto Joker movie is what it takes to get that lifted, I'm all for it. Why not? I don't have to do anything with it, although I will, I'm sure. But I don't have to do anything with it. We've gotten so many bad DC movies at this point, or uninteresting ones at least. What's another bad one if it means helping out the awesome TV universe, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, if that was an end result of this movie, then I guess go ahead and make it. I'll watch it. I'll probably hate it. I'll make fun of it, but then we'll get some good stuff out of it for the TV side at least.
Indeed.
What are we going to do in like 4 years from now when the CW verse is probably not a thing anymore?
We'll always have the memories.
Yes, that will be all what we'll all long for is those days. Because
listen, this new generation, it's not happening right now, and I hope that it doesn't. But at some point, the new generation is going to have to go through what we went through when we were kids.
Which is no real comic movies to speak of?
Yes. Which is a dearth of good comic book entertainment to be found outside of the comic books themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Or, actually, What if it's the inverse? And what if the movies and TV shows continue to do well, and the opposite happens?
The comics dry up?
Yeah.
Well, at least there we have 70 years of stories we could dig through. You know, Marvel's got the wonderful Webby Award-winning Marvel Unlimited app, and DC has nothing like that at all.
Not yet. Not yet.
Don't get your hopes up.
Infinite Crisis Omnibus is coming soon, which is going to help out with my collection needs, if not my funding. But nevertheless, as I say once more, speaking of movies that may never happen, to the shock of the world, Sony's Silver and Black movie, which was to be about the long-awaited team-up of Silver Sable and the Black Cat, is now reportedly off of the schedule and back in development. Sony has moved the World War II drama film Greyhound to that date, which I can only assume is about a greyhound who gains the ability to walk on his hind legs and fight in World War II. We also don't know if director Gina Prince Blythewood will stay attached to the Silver and Black movie or not. Two aspects of this that I find interesting. One, that this no one should be at all surprised that this is taken off the slate. I don't think either of us expected this movie to actually be a thing.
Nope.
But is it possible that the removal of this movie at this stage has to do with early footage that has been seen of Venom?
No, I don't think so. I wouldn't draw the connection between those. You know, a Venom movie, whether it winds up being good or not, at least makes some level of sense. Like, I think there's enough there for that character to drive and warrant his own movie. Now, warranting his own movie that might not have any connection whatsoever at all to the Spider-Man mythos, that's a little more tenuous, I'll admit. But a Silver and Black movie literally never made sense. There's no precedent for it in the comics. Those characters have never really interacted to any great degree, and it didn't make sense at all if they were trying to shoehorn them in together just to get their own, like, you know, female-led team-up movie. So
the reason I brought it up is that apparently Silver and Black, is in the Newsarama story, was originally supposed to share a universe with the Venom movie.
Right.
So I just wasn't sure if perhaps an early cut of the Venom movie leaked and the studio was like, let's pump the brakes a little bit before moving ahead with this one.
Well, I haven't seen anything about a Venom leak, so
No, I haven't either.
And there's always clickbaity articles that if that was the case, I'm sure somebody would have jumped on it by now and had something out there. So, I mean, while I guess anything's technically possible, I'm not reading that into this.
Well, sticking with Marvel as our theme here, let's move on to the printed page finally and get some stories out here about actual comic books. And for starters, we're going to bookend the show here, the end of the show, with a return and a departure. And the return comes in the form of Wolverine, who, I swear, Nick, it feels like a freaking year ago that Marvel announced that Wolverine was coming back. Now we're finally getting the Return of Wolverine miniseries to announce how he's back.
Logan has been around in post-credit scenes in comic books.
Right. And it feels like it's been forever, and now we're finally getting the miniseries explaining how it happened. And it's coming from a very respected writer in Charles Soule, and a very respected artist in the great Steve McNiven. But the big thing is, it's not enough just to bring Wolverine back, Nick. You gotta have some pomp and circumstance, right? You gotta have a little sizzle. You gotta have a little pizzazz to spice up your meal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You want to make the crowd go banana when they see Wolverine. And the way that they've come up with to do this is that Wolverine is not just returning as Wolverine. No. He's returning with some strange new abilities. Abilities such as the ability to heat up his claws. But only if they're out for a certain amount of time. Boy, they'll start to get warm, Nick. They will start to get warm. And if you thought Wolverine's razor-sharp adamantium claws were dangerous before when they were room temperature, Nick, imagine how much more it'll hurt to be stabbed with a warm claw.
Now, I don't know that warm is necessarily the adjective. Charles Soule, his direct quote says, once they're popped, they can heat up. They can get really hot. And then he followed it up on Twitter with a statement later on that says, it's all been building to something, folks. McNiven and I killed Logan in 2014. Now we get to bring him back. Lucky, lucky us. And regarding the claws thing, it doesn't work the way you think. It's not really a power. I look forward to everyone waiting to see how it's done in the actual story. So, Soul already responding to people who are mocking the very idea. To be frank, I think the idea is silly as well. But I
don't want to hear it. But you lost the right to complain about that years ago when you complained about Jane Foster as Thor. So to complain about other people complaining about a change in a character, come on.
I didn't complain. When did I complain?
You were setting across in your tone the concept that it was silly to overreact to the change in powers to Wolverine.
I do think you're a bit sensitive to everything Wolverine related, but much like myself,
like you with Thor. Yes.
Yeah, and you want to know the difference between you and I when it comes to those things?
Tell me more.
I will actually read Thor, and you will criticize Wolverine from afar and never actually read it.
Much like you with Gotham.
That's a great
and me
point.
With Gotham.
That's a great point.
So, but no, the concept is, here's the, by the way, I already have in my mind how that's going to work now that I've heard that tweet. That's the first time I've heard of that. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming it's going to be looked at as a weakness for Wolverine, that he can only keep his claws out for a certain amount of time before they start to heat up and he has to retract them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is that what you're thinking as well?
I was thinking it might be something like, he was encased in adamantium when he died, right? Mm-hmm. And so I looked at it as possibly maybe his healing factor caused him to literally evolve a way to get out. You know what I mean? And now the adamantium has heated up to an unstable degree to enable his escape. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's like this thing where he can't use the claws for too long or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Whatever.
We'll see how it goes. My whole deal, and yes, you're right, I am sensitive about Wolverine because I am of the opinion that almost literally everything Marvel has done with the 616 Wolverine in the last 20 years has been for the worse. The changes they've made in the character, I've talked about this with other individuals in the Place to Be Nation pod world, but the changes they've made in the character just have not, in my opinion, served the purpose of reminding people why they loved him in the first place. And I hope that happens here. Charles Soule's a really good writer. We've talked about him on the show before. Mm-hmm. But man, it's hard to get too excited about any of this. Because I actually did not like the concept of the death of Wolverine in the first place. Not because I have any issue with them killing off Wolverine. I don't read X-Men comics. But the methodology was just too... I hate when deaths are done in modern deaths are done in such an overtly gimmicked manner, and that it's it's like you can almost telegraphs the fact that it's all setting up for the return. If it has a thematic purpose, as did the death of Superman, that's one thing. But again, I feel like the missed opportunity or what people miss with Wolverine is he was never meant to be this inspirational signal to others. He was not supposed to be the inspirational X-Man. That's not his role. He's not Superman. He's not Captain America. He's not, he's not even Cyclops for that matter. Those are characters that can inspire others, can lead others. I feel like they've gone so far in the let's change Wolverine that they've taken him into this unrecognizable territory. And I hope that the series is good. I hope that it's a good story. I hope that Wolverine comes back to prominence. But man, oof.
And let's be honest, neither one of us are going to read it.
No.
Okay.
No. Unless we do a long book hunt on it in the future and we can read it on Marvel Unlimited.
Yeah, I mean that would be the only way, but I'm talking about there are lots of things that Marvel does that I think you and I both, and DC too, but
certainly.
DC books you actually have to buy individually, which is a bit more of a roadblock for me anyway. But there's lots of Marvel books that come out that we're like, hey, this looks interesting. We're going to read it on Marvel Unlimited, and then we never read it on Marvel Unlimited. So
yes,
it's one of those things.
Maybe we read the free comic book day reprint or something.
Yeah, and that's like one issue, and we go, oh well, they didn't tell the entire story for free on free comic book day. Right. Why would I read this?
Right. Or like me, gosh, that Jason Aaron Avengers looks really good. And then that's the end of it.
I'm going to continue to not buy it.
Yes.
Or read it, for that matter.
It's, But yeah. So, but nonetheless, interesting changes. But it does feel, on the surface, it feels dumb. But at least, I'll say this, I have more faith in Charles Soule to do this than I did in Weapon H, or whatever it is, the Hulk-Wolverine hybrid.
Which I think everyone is like that. Even that, my impression of reviews I've read of that online is that it's much more tongue-in-cheek than being played seriously, But I don't know. I'm not reading that either.
So, to wrap us up, we have a retirement, a departure from the world of comics and from the world of Marvel in particular. Stuart Immonen, legendary classic artist, one of the greats in the genre of superheroes, has announced that following The Amazing Spider-Man number 800, he is retiring from comics. Now, I bring this up, and I saved it for last because I know that this is an artist who's had a particular impression on you, Nick. I haven't had a chance to read nearly as much of his work as you have, but what I have read has been excellent.
Yeah. He took over Ultimate Spider-Man as the lead artist from Mark Bagley, beginning with Ultimate Spider-Man 111, and carried that through, I believe it was 150. So a good 39 issues of that title. No, excuse me. I am misspeaking all around here. He carried through the initial first volume of Ultimate Spider-Man, which I believe ended at like 139 or 140. But anyway, he had a lengthy run on Ultimate Spider-Man. He took over for Mark Bagley, who is the definitive Spider-Man artist of my fandom anyway. And yet did it in a way that was absolutely outstanding. He brought his own spin to Peter Parker in the Ultimate Universe without completely, discarding the stylings of Bagley and without going too far in the opposite direction, as the title would later do with its anime-inspired art style. And he drew just some remarkable panels, some great facial expressions. I've always had a soft spot for his work on that title, so sad to see him go at this point.
And there's actually more to this story, Nick, that I've just read. Turns out perhaps rumors of his retirement were exaggerated. As it turns out, the retirement words came from his longtime anchor, a friend of our show in spirit only, the great named Wade Von Grawbadger. If you recall him from our Starman review years ago.
I do.
But Stuart Immonen has spoken with Newsarama and says that he is taking a break from the comics industry, but isn't necessarily done completely.
Yes.
He says that if the right creator and the right collaborator comes along, I would of course consider it. For the moment, however, Catherine and I are enthusiastically devoting our time and energy to non-work matters. He also said his exclusive with Marvel has ended. So
yeah. I was aware of all these things, but it definitely feels like he is, phasing himself out of the comics world. And even Grawbadger in other interviews that were not linked to Newsarama, said that he said that Stewart was open to doing more work, but as a full-time comic book artist, his days were probably behind him. So.
Certainly, and he will be missed from the full-time ranks, as he's a great one, no doubt, and I hope to see more of his work in the future, whatever form it may take. So, with all that aside, that's the end of the rundown. We just finished off a lot of topics here, Nick. So let's move on without any further ado into reading and watching.
Reading and watching. What have you been reading and watching?
All right, so both of us have been doing some reading and watching lately. Nick, what you been reading?
Nothing.
Oh my, that was unexpected. I was not prepared for that eventuality. Well, let me shuffle my notes here. Shuffle. Rustle through the cornfields. And shuffle some more. It's the right mood for a bat fight.
We are stalling for time here.
So, I have read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 comic books. No, 6 comic books since last we spoke. 6.5. So let's get cracking on. I'm just going to go through them the way you did. That last addendum was because I finally finished the DC Nation number 0. I think is the name of it, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
I finished with the Justice League preview of Scott Snyder's No Justice series. Actually, not Justice League. No Justice is the name of it. And read that preview, and it was good. I thought it was. I was a little nervous, as you know, Nick. The concept of metal never really grabbed me when it was coming out, but I will say that the Fallout looks much more interesting. And I thought this was really well written from the perspective of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Cyborg as the point of view characters. Looked interesting, and I would like to read the miniseries at some point in the future. Moving on, I just wanted to mention this because I did not mention it on our show. I talked about this extensively on the Seller's Points Superman episode, but I read Action Comics number 1000, 80-page giant issue, celebration of the Man of Steel. Wonderful comic book. This had a murderer's row of legendary Superman creators, one of the best Superman issues I've read in a long time, a love letter to a character that means a lot to a lot of people around the world. So definitely check that out. I went back to sometime in the middle of last year, and I read Deathstroke number 14 and 15. These are by Christopher Priest, the writer, and the artist on 14 was Joe Bennett. The artist on 15 was, a combination of Larry Hama for layouts and Carlo Pagulayan for the actual pencils. This is a really nice story called Twilight that continues to play out in Deathstroke, or continued, again, a year ago. That's how far behind I am. I talk about this book a lot in our podcast, Nick, on the Haffey Award-winning Haffey Awards. We gave the Haffies its own Haffey after the show. And the Haffey Award-winning Haffey Awards featured me praising Deathstroke and praising Christopher Priest for his writing. And it just continues. Every issue I read of this, the mystery unfolds more. The characterizations are incredible. I still have no idea what's going on with the character of Jericho. I don't know if he is being sincere. I don't know if he is manipulating people. I don't know. But I know that it's all very interesting. And Slade Wilson, over the course of these couple issues, loses his eyesight and is helped out by a member of the Teen Titans he had never met before, a new Power Girl, actually. And it's a pretty interesting story of somebody who doesn't realize what a cold-blooded assassin Slade is, and he finds himself growing somewhat attached to her over the course of this mini story. So really good stuff there. And finally, I read issues 3, 4, and 5 of Doomsday Clock, so I can finally talk with some level of appropriateness about this series. I will not spoil anything about 5 because Nick you've not read 5 yet, right?
That is correct.
So I won't mention anything about 5. I will just say it's been an excellent series to this point. It just continues to kick ass. I think issues 3 and 4 were both standouts. Issue 5 was excellent as well. But I think 3 and 4 in particular, you see the interactions of Batman and Rorschach in issue 3 were, tremendous. to say the least. Absolutely tremendous. I never knew I needed Rorschach to meet Alfred the Butler, but I did, and it's happened now, and it's been awesome. Great comedy to be had here. Gary Frank is just on another level. He's never been better than this. Jeff Johns is writing in the zone. And issue 3 really ended up kind of being heartbreaking in a lot of ways. Or actually, no, I take that to number 4, which has the backups with the Mothman character. Because number 4 gives us our origin for the new Rorschach. It also introduces us to the Mothman character, who was introduced in Watchmen, and very unexpected journey for him, and a really heartbreaking supplemental material at the end of this one. And then issue 5 progresses our narrative forward, more stuff with Lex, very entertaining stuff. So, Doomsday Clock, 2 thumbs up from me so far.
Glad to hear that. I'm excited to dig into that one whenever I get the opportunity, which should be here in the coming week.
Excellent news. Well, with that being said, it's time to bring us to watching. And when it comes to watching, Nick, that's something we're good at. So I have watched The Flash, all of the episodes.
Yep.
And I have also caught up on Supergirl.
Yep.
So
except for, of course, this week's episode.
Except for this week's. Haven't watched that yet.
Yep.
But where should we begin? I mean, should we go 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, let's just jump right to the Flash season finale real quick. It's been 2 weeks, so we won't spend a terrible amount of time on this. But I thought it was a good season finale, not a great one. I would place it probably behind the season 1 finale and behind last year's season 3 finale, but ahead of the season 2 finale. So a fine season finale, good enough. I dug them getting to. Spoiler alert, bring Ralph back. I enjoyed that. Was glad to see that he'll be a part of the show going forward. But ultimately, I thought the way they defeated the Thinker, I don't know, didn't really sit well with me. But the closing of the episode, the reveal of who the mystery girl that's popped up throughout the season actually is, has me intrigued for what season 5 is going to be. It seems like season 5 has the potential to be very different from any season of The Flash that has preceded it.
Yes, I would agree with that portion of it as well. I actually thought this was the worst season finale of The Flash. I wouldn't say I was underwhelmed. I would say I was whelmed by it. This is
not better than Zoom and Barry running around in the circle to you, like literally running on that loop thing.
Yeah, I think I enjoyed this less. Yeah.
Oh man,
I think this was, for me, this was just extremely paint by the numbers. I thought it was a not very creative way to beat the Thinker after a season of building him to a point that you can make the argument that maybe they made him too powerful to the point where there was no way to get out of it. I don't know, but it did not speak true to me. Physically beating him in his own mind was weird to me and a little bit lazy. And I mean, it was okay. It wasn't bad. I didn't think it was bad. I just thought it was okay. And there were elements of it that were great. I loved the cliffhanger heading in the next season. I'm really excited about that. I think that was really cool. I thought getting, anytime Ralph's on screen is going to be super entertaining. He was great. I actually really dug the Harry thing. I don't know about you. I thought I've seen some people go back and forth on how they liked the Harry element in the season finale. I thought it was really cool, and I think there's some ambiguity there that you and I were talking about off air that makes it particularly interesting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested to see where the Harry thing goes, how they follow up on it, if at all, and who their new version of Harrison Wells, who they've already said will be in there, Tom Cavanaugh. There will be a new version of him in season 5. So I'm excited about all of it, really.
And remember, Thawne is still out there somewhere.
Somewhere, indeed.
And the last time we saw him, he was wearing the face of Wells. So a lot of potential there for the future. So overall, solid enough season finale, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But that brings us to Supergirl, and we've had 2 episodes.
And yeah, that episode, it was just kind of boring to me. I didn't really care about much that was going on in it. That whole Caulfield or whatever his name is subplot that has recurred throughout the season has just not been that interesting. I think the first episode was okay, like it was a little creepy, but they're trying to make it this recurring thing, and it has me very concerned that he's going to play like this major role in the series even beyond next season, and that whole character is just not that interesting, honestly.
No, I was going to say that episode had ended with a cliffhanger that it felt like was supposed to feel like, ooh, oh no, what's going to happen next? And instead I went, really? That guy again?
Again?
Yeah.
Where was he exactly supposed to be during this episode? Like, he wasn't with his followers for what reason?
I have no idea.
They had turned on him. Oh, that's right. They had turned on him to fully embrace Rain instead of Supergirl, or I don't even know. Who cares? But
yeah, it was. I would agree. The episode was not. I did think that they had some interesting elements with James Olsen on it, although it did have one of the most cringeworthy lines of dialogue, I thought.
No.
In the history of the show, maybe.
Yes, it did.
Do you know the line I'm talking about, Nick?
Yes, I do.
Well, I don't even remember what it is now. I think it was racism is another form of is the lowest form of bullying or something
racism
like
is the oldest form of bullying.
The oldest form of bullying. And it's delivered so earnestly. So it's just hard to describe what a bad line it was.
I've been searching, Greg, since the death of Carl for my new character that I just beat the drum for the death of until it finally happens and I get to celebrate. And I have finally decided that character needs to be James Olsen. You said they did interesting things with him in this episode. I would disagree wholeheartedly with that statement. They've never done anything interesting with that character ever. And thus, I want him to die a brutal, brutal death.
I will say, I think James Olsen, boyfriend of Lena Luthor, is at least more tolerable than James Olsen, love interest of Kara, or James Olsen, guardian, or James Olsen, head of Catco.
The problem is, he's of those four things that you just mentioned,
he's still two of them.
He's still all of them except for one. Like he's still running, having a major role in the operations of Catco. They've actually stepped up his involvement as Guardian over the last few episodes, and he's involved with Lena Luthor, which is, while that's not as bad as some of the other things he's done, come on, you're telling me that's the most interesting thing you could do with Lena? I feel like she's being saddled with the dead weight that is James Olsen.
Or even the weight that is James Olsen. But I thought the following episode was tremendous.
Was really good, yes, I would agree.
The following episode returned the focus to Kara and her trip to the stars alongside Mon-El to find this artifact they need to ultimately break Rain's hold over Samantha. So they're off into space, and they come across a lost city, a literal lost city, Argos City, the hometown, the homeland of Supergirl, which we learned survived the Kryptonian explosion all those years ago and has been floating along in the vast expanses of space. And it's here where Kara actually encounters her mother, still living and breathing, and they have a very heartfelt reunion. And her mother, of course, played by the tremendous Erica Durance, who was Lois Lane on Smallville, and in some respects, maybe the best Lois Lane. The argument could certainly be made. And this was just a great episode. Everything with Kara and her mom was excellent. Mon-El's subplot, helping out the sickly child in Argo City, was excellent. The stuff back home with Rain and Lena and Maggie and Ruby, all that stuff, excellent. Jean and his dad, of course, continue to steal every scene that they're in. Thought this whole thing was great, man.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. This was a outstanding episode from beginning to end, and ended on a hell of a cliffhanger that's got me really anticipating seeing how they resolve that here in the next episode. But I think it's an interesting story dynamic to bring Kara's mom back onto the table, one that should hopefully be something that is addressed later on down the road. I don't want to see that entire dynamic blown off in this season. I think it's something that should be left on the table for season 4. But, we'll see how all that plays out going forward.
I would love to see Erica Durance come on as a series regular next year.
Mm-hmm. Or at least a recurring player. Maybe not a regular, because I don't want Kara spending a lot of time on Argo City, and I also don't want to see Argo City, preemptively destroyed. Like, eventually, probably, yes, but I think this season would be too soon.
You just love seeing our heroes suffer, don't you?
Well, but it goes back to that thing, Greg, where you and I have agreed on this.
Yeah.
The more Kryptonians there are, the less important it makes the rest of them,
And much like we said about the Flash after last season, it's time to get a big bad that is not Kryptonian in nature.
Yes, I would agree.
And that being said, Rain has been awesome, so I'm not complaining about Rain in the slightest, but I hope next season is a different kind of threat. And it looks like that threat could end up being Lena.
It does appear to be setting that up, which should make for a very interesting season.
Well, what else have I been watching lately? We talked about Deadpool 2 last week.
But you hadn't seen it at that point.
Right. Oh, that's right. I have seen Deadpool 2 now, so we can talk about it openly. Deadpool 2 was awesome. I don't know, honestly, Nick, what else to say about it. It was fantastic, and I can't wait to see it again.
Yeah, it was outstanding. We don't want to spoil any of the gags or jokes for you, but it was that perfect blend of playing some of the familiar beats from the first one while adding some new elements and just taking the foundation of the first one to a whole other level. So,
an unexpected, because make no mistake, this movie doesn't take itself seriously at all. It is a comedy. It embraces being a comedy. It wants to be a comedy. But, like so many great comedies before it, there is a surprising emotional gravity to it that I wasn't expecting going in.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those movies where you go in expecting to laugh and have a good time, and then when they throw you a little, emotionally affecting subplot in there as well, it kind of gives you this whole, it gives you this perfect package of story. So, Deadpool 2 was amazing. I stand by my opinion that I think it's a slight cut above the first one.
Yes, I agree. And one thing that I think everyone can agree on, the greatest of all credit scenes that we've ever seen.
The best of all time. No doubt about it.
So good. So yeah, go out if you're of age, and I certainly hope you're of age if you're listening to us. Go out and watch Deadpool 2. And finally, I've been watching Black Lightning. I have binged that and watched 3 episodes. I only have 1 more to go on the season. So the last episode I watched ended with Khalil and Tobias Hoyle, who had just returned in the episode, incapacitating Black Lightning and actually briefly killing him before he's revived by his daughters, which appears to be setting up a final confrontation. It also has Tobias Hoyle bringing in Lala and seeming to issue a code word that gives him control over him. Now, I haven't seen the finale yet, Nick, but can you give me a spoiler? Do they ever explain how Lala came back to life?
Vaguely, yes.
Okay, does that happen in the finale, I'm guessing?
I think so. Yes, I think so.
Okay. I just wasn't sure if I missed something, but okay. Well, it's been excellent. It's been really good. There are some hits and misses with stuff here and there. I am not as invested in the main relationship, I think, as the show probably wants me to be, but I think that's more due to the fact that some of her changes and feelings on him have been a little sudden. Mm-hmm. But I think other than that, it's been very, very good. I've actually come around a little bit on the character of Gamby. I still don't think he's a very good actor, but I think the character is a hell of a lot more interesting now than he was earlier on in the season. And I've very much enjoyed pretty much everything involving all the villains. I think the villains are really strong.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the season finale once you finally get a chance to see it.
Indeed so. Anything else to add, Nick? Have you been watching anything other than what we've talked about?
No, not that I can think of. No, I have not. Not that is comic book related in any way.
Yes. Well, we've reached the end of our journey, it appears.
Mm-hmm.
But not the end of our show, because I cannot help but look at the clock on the wall, Nick, because there's a minute on the clock, and it's time for the Wrestling Minute. Big week ahead of us, Nick. This weekend, we are gathering together to watch New Japan Pro Wrestling's presentation of Dominion, which will be headlined by Kenny Omega versus Kazuchika Okada 4 in a no-time limit 2 out of 3 falls match. It will also be co-headlined by Chris Jericho and Tetsuya Naito, or Naito, or however you pronounce it, and also will include Will Ospreay defending the Junior Championship against Hiromu Takahashi. Your thoughts on this card, Nick?
Oh, I can't wait. It looks outstanding from top to bottom. You know, I have actually purchased the New Japan Pro Wrestling World subscription service just for this event. I'm looking forward to having you and the esteemed Russell Sellers here to the home to watch it, and of course, delight you with some culinary experiences that will be brought to you by Rec Tech Grills out of Augusta, Georgia. Quick shout out to those guys.
And in addition to the great pro wrestling, I'm always excited to have your smoked meat. Well, with that being said, that is the end of the Wrestling Minute. Lots more going on, but you can keep up with that through our various social media platforms. We do watch wrestling, so if you have any questions about wrestling, let us know. But mainly we want to get your questions about comics or your ideas for the show. We've already had some really great solicited ideas from audience members out there for things that we're going to be looking at in the near future. But what do we have immediately on deck for the loyal listeners of the Hard-Traveling Fanboys?
Well, coming up in the next few weeks, next week we are getting back to our long book hunt as we turn once again to the pages of Marvel for one of those aforementioned listener requests, as we are going to be looking at Ed Brubaker's Daredevil story, The Devil in Cell Block D. So we're going to be looking at that next week on our long book hunt. The following week we will be doing a long promised and long feared off the page as we take a look back at the Amazing Spider-Man 2 with an as of yet undetermined panel of guests. And
an as of yet undetermined method of watching the film.
Yeah, we'll figure all that out. And then we will wrap up the month of June with, actually, we're going to bring back a countdown topic that we did for our, back during the old column writing days. We're going to see if it's changed at all since then. As we, in honor of Father's Day in the month of June, we're going to be counting down our best dads in comics in audio form. So looking forward to all of that.
Ah, yes. And one thing that we forgot to mention during the Guardians movie earlier is the cameo from Stan Lee.
Yes.
As he is revealed to be a Marvel Celestial. And gives us the terrific vintage Stan line, "Ah, gee, oh, geez," which is just perfect Stan.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
So, that's what you can expect from us. Also, be sure to listen to all the other great podcasts here at PlayStation Nation Pop. Marvel Age, I mentioned. Talkin' Pop, the Haffey Award-winning Talkin' Pop. Sellers Points podcast, Sunday Groove, my God, you didn't interrupt me with Easy Like David Sunday.
I'm sorry, I was distracted, but yes, Easy Like David Sunday.
And then what else? Gosh, there's so many. Geek and Sassy, of course, can't leave them out.
Haffey Award-winning Talkin' Pop.
Yes, I already mentioned them. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The
aforementioned Marvel Age, of course.
Yes. Conversation Comics.
Mm-hmm. Sellers Points.
Sellers Points. Gosh, dang it. I'm tired of this phone. That's a new podcast, by the way, coming this fall.
Gosh dang it, I'm tired of this phone, in which Greg just reads text messages from certain individuals.
Yes. Who will remain nameless at this time. But anyway, so you popped me with that one, Nick. Damn it. Now I'm out of sorts.
Yeah, that would be an awesome idea for a podcast, or a pod blast, more likely, because he would never actually listen to it. Like, and you could share it with him, and he would still never listen to it.
He'd still never listen. That's a good point. Yes, just us vaguely referring to him.
Yes.
So, in any event, we do hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Let us know your thoughts. Any final thoughts to leave the listeners with this week, Nick?
No, none at all. Thanks for listening. Listen to more of the Hard-Traveling Fanboys in the archives. Listen to Marvel Age. Listen to all the other great shows on Place to Be Nation. Poop!
Hard-Traveling Fanboys, Hard-Traveling Fanboys, Hard-Traveling Fanboys, Hard-Traveling Fanboys, Hard-Traveling Fanboys, Hard-Traveling Fanboys, Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
When you hear this show, you better run for cover. Klondike Bill's a sausage lover.
I got a 10-inch kielbasa from Klondike Bill.
Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
Slobber.
It's a weekly podcast and you better listen. Keep your ears in mid-condition. Ooh, Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
You got a 33 and third chance of winning. Hard-Traveling Fanboys, 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 Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
Got 2 weekly segments coming to your town. Reading, watching, and the rundown. Do.
Thank you.
It's the greatest show on Place to Be Nation. Certainly a unique situation. Ooh, Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
Oh, they're pretty, they're skittles. Hard-Traveling Fanboys, 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 Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
You vicious little son of a bitch.
They're indivisible. They're microwavable.
No, Mr. Eddie.
Ooh, Hard-Traveling Fanboy. Oi, 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 oi.
Are you gonna give me fucking anything on this show, or why are we even here?
Listen up, slap dick. Let me answer the fucking question. Give me a minute. Well, Klondike Bill told me that if he ever came across a woman who was extremely clean and well kept, he would tell her to put on a pair of sweatpants and a sweatshirt, go take a 2-mile jog, and then come back and see him when she was done.
I believe it was quite sudden and painful.
Hard-Traveling Fanboys, 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 Hard-Traveling Fanboys,